Bizarre Inquiries with Shayn Orin.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to the show where we let our minds wander into usually some obscure and strange things. I am the one that, like 5 people, call Shane Squatch.
What the hell is even that?
And over here with me, I have the big bad Boo Daddy, Orin Felix himself.
Who is your daddy, and what does he do?
Answer the question.
Yes, Daddy.
Okay.
Hopefully you enjoyed that intro.
that was quite the intro.
I had to throw in a little bit of Alex Jones because I don't have Alex Jones on the soundboard today. So I had to combine it and mix up the Who's Your Daddy with an Alex Jones one. So 2 birds, 1 stone, man. There you go. And you get a super dirty daddy. So there you go.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a little suggestive, but I was not expecting Arnold there, so you surprised me.
And the super raunchy, yes, daddy. Got to mix it up from the daddy chill because I don't want people to get bored of it, you know?
So just for argument's sake, what sort of video or movie or documentary did you find that daddy audio from?
A good old Soundboards website. I didn't go that crazy with it. It was submitted by a listener. They were like, oh, this would be perfect. Here's a perfect daddy moment. And they just sent me this really, really raunchy video, man. I didn't know what to do about it. Kind of got me a little excited, you know.
I'm calling bullshit on that one. Speaking of bullshit, Shane, I hear you have some important and exciting updates for our listeners.
Semi-important. I'm sure that a lot of people have heard it on the normal feed for the normal episodes, but if anybody hasn't caught it, the Discord is back. And with that, of course, if you guys want to continue the discussion from this show and bring it over there, that's something that we could definitely start doing. But if anybody is interested in joining the Discord, if you guys didn't catch it on the other episodes, or if you're strictly just a YouTube watcher, then if you guys go to our social media page, go to the highlights, I have a reel that makes it so that it has the link for the Discord. Until I get a certain amount of members, it won't let me add it as a link on Linktree and all that stuff, so I kind of got to work a way around it. But that's how you guys can find it, access it, hop in, you know, have some fun conversations, and submit some questions for this wacky-ass show.
All right.
And before we get into stuff today, do you have anything new and exciting going on with you, Orin?
No, not much over here. Really only piece of news and updates that I've got on my end. Again, like we've been talking about on the main show, here in a couple months, we're going to be at the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Festival in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. It's the last weekend of July. It's like 25th, 26th, something like that. We're not going to be vending or anything, but we are going to be hanging out. So if any of our listeners and viewers out there are going to be at the show, definitely hit us up. Would really like to hang out and maybe sip some moonshine with you guys.
And with the talks of Bigfoot, that leads us right in to our very first story today. So as everybody has probably heard recently from the news, there was a recent sighting of Sasquatch in Monroe, Michigan. And for people that aren't familiar with Monroe, Michigan, it's not too far from the city, kind of a more suburban area. But with a lot of the Sasquatch stuff lately, it seems like there's been a lot of weirdness with them diving into some suburban areas and hanging out in some suburban areas. But with that, of course, I'm sure most people have heard it from main news sources. I'm sure, Orin, have you read it from main news sources or anything too?
No, I actually haven't seen anything on this, so I'm excited to learn about it just along with our listeners.
So at least in Michigan, it's been spread all over the place, and just like assumably with most mainstream news channels, you know, they of course are like, oh, reputable Sasquatch sighting, but they kind of turn it all into like a big joke, you know, because that's just what they do with mainstream media.
Nothing to see here.
Yeah, nothing to see here, people. So with that, of course, I figured that it'd be a good spot to dive into the original report submitted to the BFRO to kind of give people more of an insight on this. And of course, I will bring up something that we also covered on our recent episode. But as far as this original sighting goes, I'm just going to read it to you guys pro bono so you guys know exactly what supposedly happened with this Michigan sighting. And I'll get your thoughts on it before I throw in the other part of it. But without further ado, at least, this report basically says the GPS coordinates are not precise. This GPS point is in the marsh near the railroad tracks, but it is otherwise off the mark from where the incident occurred. At the time of this posting, I am still awaiting precise coordinates. I wanted to post this report because the incident happened this morning. This GPS point is definitely in the marsh and near the railroad bed mentioned in this report. And then it gives you the GPS locations. But getting into the main sighting, I was bow fishing with my son around 11:30 a.m. We walked down the creek, Plum Creek, past 4 bridges, railroad bridges, and headed into the marsh. 100 yards into the marsh, the dog scared up something that was bending there. Trees were shaking, We thought it was a group of deer. We continued on 200 more yards to the creek basin in the marsh. We sat and enjoyed the wildlife for a little bit. We headed back through cattails and saw a lot of deer beds on the way to the first bridge. We crossed the first bridge and was between that and the second bridge. We heard sirens in the distance. My son said, "Do you hear those?" I set down my bow and arrow to get out my cell phone and earbuds. I wanted to listen to the police scanner app on my phone to see what was going on. My son was behind me and the dog was off to the right. All of a sudden, I heard rustling in the trees to the left and a huge thud hitting the ground from the trees. A big heavy animal hit the ground and crouched and started moving towards me through the brush. My dog fired off from the right of me towards the creature. The dog almost got to it, but the creature shot off extremely fast through the trees and brush. The dog chased the creature up the slope and over the train tracks, and then I then called for my dog to come back. My son said, "Holy shit, what was that?" It was a big bear or something, but it looked like a gorilla. We walked back, but we heard something crunching on the ground behind us. We left. And of course, there was 2 witnesses to this one, and we'll, of course, dive into some other articles with it. But before we get into this part, what's your original thoughts, at least, on this sighting report?
Couple things that I thought were kind of interesting about it. First off, we always talk about how a lot of this high strangeness and cryptid type activity happens around bodies of water. So right off the rip, I thought it was kind of interesting that this happened on a creek bed. Number 2, the fact that he talks about railroad tracks multiple times in this, I thought was interesting because, again, a lot of times cryptid and high strangeness activity seems to occur around railroad tracks. I've heard thoughts because it's kind of like a liminal space. It's the same idea as like crossroads or things like that. And it's kind of like window areas, places where the veil is thinner, what have you. But other than those 2 details, it kind of just seems like fairly standard Bigfoot sighting type stuff. But I do think both of those small details are pretty interesting in light of a lot of other weird stuff that we talk about on the show.
And I also want to point out that something I always find interesting with these encounters is the people that don't directly call it a Sasquatch. Because note the fact that he says it looked like a big bear with a gorilla head, and they didn't actually throw the word like Sasquatch or Bigfoot, which I always find a lot more fascinating with these reports because, for me at least, it kind of shows that the person isn't out here looking for Bigfoot.
Right.
Because I feel like some of the most reputable sightings of Bigfoot are usually these ones where people are just off doing their own thing. They have no standard or paradigm of Sasquatch. Then all of a sudden this thing completely comes in and just shatters their mind. And I mean, I feel like that part of it at least is kind of interesting and worth noting. But the whole like Monroe County idea, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, it seems like Sasquatches are coming closer to the city, and there's a lot of conspiracies on that. One that I recently heard about was from somebody who's one of the First Nation people. His name is Tom Seawood, and he does a bunch of like the Bigfoot stuff up near Washington/Canada area. And what was my point I was trying to get at here? He talks about, that's what it was, the conspiracy of Sasquatch. So he talks about this idea that like Gatling guns were originally created for taking out large numbers of Native Americans all at once so that they could free up the land. So he brought in the whole like black helicopter phenomenon that seems to happen with Sasquatch. And the weird part about it where you see a helicopter, but you don't hear anything, or the vice versa, that you hear stuff, but you start looking around and there's no helicopter in sight. So there's some kind of weird operation going on past that. But he's basically saying that he believes that they're kind of doing the same thing that they're doing to the natives, where they're, trying to take these things out in these areas so that nobody's running into them. They don't have to worry about the problem, any of that. So he was kind of suggesting that they might be coming closer to cities for the sake of being able to, one, hide easier, because if you see just a bunch of heat signatures near a city, it's a lot easier to hide yourself instead of having a bunch of heat signatures in the middle of the woods. And also, you can't really like fly by with a black helicopter and open up gunfire into a city. So, I mean, it definitely makes sense with some of the reports that these things are starting to come closer to cities. But the other thing that I want to bring up as a recent portion of this, and Orin, I'm sure that you remember covering it on a recent episode, the Monroe monster sighting.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to get your opinions on that, but just to kind of paraphrase it from last time we talked about on the episode, and if anybody wants more detail, you guys can go back and check out our recent Michigan Mysteries episode. But the main moral of the story, the main thing that gist of the story that happened, this woman's driving down the road, and the Sasquatch basically catches up next to the car. He supposedly grabs her hair, slams her head, gives her a black eye, and then just kind of runs off. And there was a bunch of other reports that went along with it where, people were claiming to see Sasquatch in the area. And some of the weird reports were like, oh, they were wearing clothes and they were hanging out by the river, blah, 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 blah. But at least in my opinion, I think that the original initial sighting that happened, the one where like the Sasquatch comes up and grabs this woman's hair and gives her a black eye, like that doesn't seem like typical like Sasquatch behavior. Even in the aspect of like, if they wanted to grab you and get you, they're going to grab you and get you, and you're not going to be seen from again. They're not just going to like come up, slap you around and leave. Like, I think the original report may have been bullshit. Maybe some of the side reports that came off, probably something to it, but the whole like 1960s encounters in Monroe seems to be like the epitome that everybody's connecting this with. But for me, at least, doing the research from the Michigan standpoint, like I think the main things that they're focusing on, that they're trying to connect this with, is probably complete bullshit. But I do think that there is a lot of legitimacy to this recent sighting, especially considering a lot of like, again, the moving closer to the cities and stuff. But what's kind of your thoughts on this, even connecting in with some of the older sightings that we covered recently?
Yeah, back to the Monroe monster sighting, and I'm sure we talked about this when we talked about it on the previous episode. I don't remember exactly, but the whole like chasing the car down thing and all that is much more kind of like dogman type behavior than what we normally associate with Sasquatch. And like we've talked about 100 times on the show, these quote unquote Sasquatch encounters where, they are super aggressive and chase cars and attack people and things like that, especially if they happened like decades ago, very well could be misidentified, kind of what we would consider now dogman sightings. So I think it's, possible that something like that happened. And then, through Game of Telephone, whatever else, the story kind of got blown out of proportion to what it is now. But circling back around to this most recent report, yeah, I think there's a lot of validity that you could put in this report because, like you said, they didn't straight up say it's a Sasquatch. These weren't, cryptid hunters out there looking for something. This is a dude, hunting with his son, and they see this weird thing. And it sounds to me like the adult wouldn't have even registered, the Sasquatch connection if the son didn't say, holy shit, it looks like a bear with ape's face or whatever it was. So again, like you kind of alluded to earlier, the fact that this was not somebody who was out there looking for this and then just had this weird encounter that they couldn't explain, I think that gives a lot of validity to not just this particular encounter, but a lot of encounters like this.
And also to throw it in here too, they were saying that they were hearing a siren, and that goes in with like a lot of the Ohio howls. And at least for, I don't think this was the first Saturday of the month. I don't know if they do that in every state, but at least in Michigan, the first Saturday of every month, they test the the emergency alert system. But usually they do it at 1:00. So even if this was a Saturday in the beginning of the month, this wouldn't have been the time because this supposedly happened at 11:30. So I think this guy was also experiencing like a howl on top of that. If you said like a siren, probably something that's relatively close to like the Ohio howl. And to throw in another part, I didn't want to grab the video because it's like a 12-minute video, so it would have been too long for this. But there was somebody that went out and they interviewed these two, the kid and the dad. With a lot of these Sasquatch stuff, it comes from these guys that seem like they're very knowledgeable when it comes to the woods. And at least like watching the video of this guy talking, telling his report, he seems like a very like woodsy type guy. He seems like he's very familiar with the woods. And him and his son just don't seem like the type that are just going to be making stuff up. Like they seem like when they were telling their report that they were kind of a little bit shaky as they were kind of telling it. So, it doesn't seem like they're coming up and they're like, oh yeah, this is this thing that happened. Like it happened here, blah, 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 blah. They're kind of like telling it, but they seem like weary of telling it, which at least from like reading body language, I don't know, that kind of brings more like validity to it to me at least, that, I think they actually did see something. And especially with a lot of the stuff that we always talk about. I mean, we're kind of desensitized to the whole Sasquatch thing where if somebody says, I had a Sasquatch report, you're like, all right, let's sit down, tell me all about it. But these guys, they were brought into like mainstream news where, at least in Michigan, it was all over like ABC, like all the main channels. And they started it off with like, oh yeah, Sasquatch, this is reputable. And then by the end, they were kind of like, ha ha, Sasquatch, that's funny, ha ha ha. They kind of turned it into a joke. So it's like the usual, like, why would these two want to go and get scrutinized by people on the news and becoming a laughing stock unless they may have actually like had something. And I mean, obviously Bigfoot reporters are taking this seriously, but like mainstream news completely like made a mockery out of them. So it's like, I feel bad for them. But on the flip side, like I think that they honestly experienced something and they wanted to make people aware of it, even for their own validity of feeling safer in the woods themselves, you know?
Yeah. And, like we talk about a lot on the show, the fact that podcasts and the internet and things like that have given so many eyewitnesses and experiencers a forum to not be ridiculed and not be judged and share their stories about things like this in a quote unquote safe space, that's done a lot for all of this kind of research. But like you said, still anything mainstream, especially like small town local news, you're not going to be getting a lot of open-mindedness, let's just say, from those sort of avenues. So, I mean, I think that shows that as far as we've come with things like this, as far as acceptance and people being able to share their stories, we still got a ways to go with it.
I mean, at least the good news is, from what I've heard from a couple of friends in the community, apparently Small Town Monsters is out either today and was out here yesterday, and they were doing some type of report on it. So I don't want them to give away their information, but at least they're taking it seriously, and hopefully they will kind of bring some validity to these statements rather than, again, them just being a mockery on the news. Because at least Small Town Monsters in the community is very reputable. So they're going to hopefully kind of spin it a bit. Not spin it, like mess up the story, but spin it in a way that's going to be present it in a way that's going to be a little bit more positive for them. Because at least somebody's taking it seriously. That's a good, substantial researcher in the community,
Oh, cool. Well, when their report or video or whatever they come up with for this comes out, maybe we'll have to readdress this on a future episode.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And before we close this one out, do you have any final thoughts or anything on this one? I figured this would be a quick one to touch, but I, at least being a Michigander, of course, I had to bring it up, and I figured that it's kind of hard to do on the show just to throw it in there, so this would probably be the spot for it. So,
no, I think I'm good on that one. Interesting story, some good follow up with stuff we've talked about recently on the show, which I always enjoy. So, no, that was a good one. Thanks for bringing that to the table tonight.
Absolutely. And now, hopping into the next one. So, as everybody knows that listened to the recent episode that we did with Harley Owens, as usual, I always got to bring up the weird CERN stuff. So you guys may have gotten a little taste of what we were going to talk about for this one on that last episode. But in case you didn't, I found this fancy little video that has an explanation of the weirdness that they have going on at CERN now. Because I feel like we can't let us, at this point, dude, we've covered CERN so many times, we just can't let a CERN story slide through our fingers. Like, we got to bring it up. So
it's one of our core things on this show.
Oh, and I'm sure we're going to get weird with this one. So let's get into this explanation so that we can talk shit about CERN like we usually do.
All right, let her rip.
In a groundbreaking achievement, physicists at CERN's Large Hadron Collider have successfully turned lead into gold, fulfilling the ancient dream of alchemists, if only for a fleeting moment. As part of the ALICE, a Large Ion Collider experiment project, researchers observed gold nuclei forming during high-energy collisions of lead atoms. This modern form of chrysopoeia, the mythical transmutation of base metals into gold, echoes a goal pursued for centuries but achieved only through the power of nuclear physics. The process occurred during near-miss collisions between lead nuclei, which created conditions similar to those just after the Big Bang. These unique interactions allowed for the formation of gold atoms, offering valuable data on the behavior of nuclear matter under extreme conditions. Although the gold existed only briefly before being annihilated in the aftermath of the collisions, the event marks a significant scientific milestone. Historically, alchemists were inspired to transform lead into gold due to their similar density and metallic appearance. However, the realization that they are chemically distinct elements proved that such transformation couldn't be achieved by chemical means. It wasn't until the development of nuclear physics in the 20th century that scientists began to explore nuclear transmutation, turning one element into another using particle bombardment. While gold has been synthesized in labs before using nuclear reactors or particle accelerators, the ALICE experiment introduces a novel mechanism through ultra-relativistic ion collisions. The findings, detailed in physical review journals, enhance our understanding of fundamental physics and the origins of heavy elements in the universe.
I shall have you tried for witchcraft and burnt at the stake.
So, initial thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the coolest stories we've talked about on this show. The fact that it's CERN to start off with should raise all sorts of red flags. The fact that basically they're doing modern day scientific alchemy, which alchemy is like the original occult art. You know, it's the original thing that they were trying to do with magic, you know, is turn base metals into gold. So the fact that CERN has successfully done this in light of all the other shit that we know about CERN, as far as like opening portals and, you know, trying to summon the old gods and things like that, it's just par for the course with what we already know about CERN, and just goes right along to prove that, you know, magic, or, you know, whatever you want to call that, and science are two sides of the same coin, and these people are just doing very advanced technological modern day magic.
This is what I've been saying forever, is that all these occult concepts, they're not magic, so to speak. It's just it's an understanding of science to a different level, that you turn these things that are occult into real things. But on the flip side, though, like you said, there's so much occult symbolism and weirdness with CERN that it's just kind of like, all right, which facet are you coming into this from? Are you coming into this from the occult side, or are you coming into this from the scientific side? Because you claim that you're coming into it from the scientific side, but all I've seen from you guys is the occult side.
Yeah.
And just to bring up a sake of argument, remember that they have a Shiva statue outside, which is the whole concept of like destroy to rebuild to begin with. They had the weird opening ceremonies where it was super occultic, and even adding into more, something else we covered on the show, symmetry, where they had all of the weird visuals of like somebody dancing inside of the circle with this dark cloaked figure like watching from the outside.
Yeah,
like,
very ritualistic looking.
Like they put so much occult stuff into stuff that like I don't understand how anybody can see this and not see it any other way than like they're conducting alchemy. Like these guys are fucking mad scientists. They're witches. Like that one guy kind of yelled from the background. They need to be burned at the stake and tried as a witch.
Well, and you know, the whole thing with like the Anunnaki and gold and all of that, I think is very interesting in light of this, because yeah, gold is valuable, but like CERN is doing such quote unquote like high level scientific things, like creating gold, like just for the monetary aspect of it, kind of seems like beneath them to me. But when you consider that, you know, people have said that gold really only is valuable because of the social value we place on it. And really the only other thing that it's useful for is making microchips, which goes back to, like I said, the whole Anunnaki, we were a slave race to mine gold for the gods, basically. And when this, you know, possibly occult organization is basically trying to figure out ways to manufacture gold, when, you know, they've basically also said their main goal is to connect with the old gods, I mean, it all kind of just falls into place for me.
Let me throw some other weird stuff in here too. So part of the whole conspiracy too with gold, and I guess this probably was partially scientifically proven if we did actually go to the moon, and that's a whole other can of worms open up, but the whole idea that gold supposedly blocks this radiation that you experience in space, which goes into the whole Anunnaki thing, and why they were trying to harvest gold from the earth is because it was supposed to help with blocking some type of like radiation. So if you consider the fact that I think I heard recently on Joe Rogan that the amount of gold that exists in the world that we like know of currently that's in circulation is about like half a football field worth, like laying flat. So if there's only so much gold in the world, and it's maybe a very specific component that you need for quote unquote space travel, then maybe it's a matter of creating more for the sake of actually being able to readily use it to transverse these other places and go into space. But just to add on a little bit more onto this, that it gets a little bit weirder. Are you familiar with who Trey Hudson is in the Meadow Project?
I am not.
Okay, so he wrote a couple books about it. Dude, it's something really fascinating. You'll have to dive into at least listening to a podcast episode or two of him talking about this area. But he basically kind of discovered this like strange, almost like portal-like area where they have this like weird phenomenon where there's like time lapses, and there's people that'll like go into this area that looks like a square, and then they'll like come out as like a beam of light, but they won't see themselves as a beam of light, even though from the other side they caught this person moving as like an orb. But he was saying that part of the effect that seems to be caught with a lot of these like portal locations is this like radioactive aspect that comes with it. And he was mentioning that two of the people from his team that supposedly like went into this portal area that they were talking about ended up having some like negative like health side effects caused from going through this. And to connect in with another weird part, like the Philadelphia experiment, where they went through this supposed portal and it ended up causing a lot of negative effects for the people, quote, you know, going in, partially becoming part of the ship, all this other weird shit. So if CERN is working on particle colliders and opening portals. And I'm sure that they're aware of the fact that there's this radioactive component to it, because there's a lot of people with the phenomenon that's talking about this, even with like extraterrestrials and stuff. Because I mean, remember the whole thing with extraterrestrial ships that people get like radiation burns from these things. Right. So if they are trying to open up portals, maybe the component of trying to produce gold with it is because they need gold in order for a quote human possibly to transverse through these portals. But again, if there's only so much gold in the earth, and you need this gold in order to start doing these experiments for people to start going through, then you need to find a way to produce some of your own gold. Otherwise, you know, who knows what happens to that gold supply? I mean, maybe it burns up as it goes through. Like who fucking knows? So I feel like there's some other components as to why they're producing gold, and I think it has something to do with the connection with radiation, with UFOs and portals, and potentially gold blocking some of this radiation.
No, I think that's a really great point. I mean, the statistic that you brought up about, you know, all the gold in the world is only half of a football field or whatever, like that doesn't seem like very much gold at all to me. So
that's why it holds its value.
Yeah. So, I mean, if they are, you know, trying to create, you know, space suits or craft or whatever that can traverse these different dimensions or wormholes or whatever you want to call it, no, it makes a lot of sense that they would need to manufacture the material to do this. Because I mean, going back to what you said about, you know, if we landed on the moon, you know, if you go to the Smithsonian and see, you know, the fucking little aluminum foil spaceship that we were supposed to have like landed on the moon with, like, there's no way you actually made that journey with that. So it makes a lot of sense to me that you would need this really tough, precious metal, you know, for material if you're actually going to do things like this.
And you wouldn't be able to make like the fool's gold like they were kind of talking about. It would have to be like the exact setup for gold. So, I mean, if this was the first run for it and they literally had it down to a molecular level of it being gold, I mean, I feel like that's just the opening to a whole other portal of, one, like I said, using these materials to go through possible portals or go into space or whatever that happens to be. Or on the flip side, creating more infinite wealth for yourself. If, you know, you pretend like there's only this much gold in the world and then you're able to produce gold over here, you know, you can you're basically just printing your own money at that point.
I mean, this is basically the plot of 007 Goldfinger, you know, irradiating the gold supply. So the gold you have is more valuable. So
exactly.
There we go.
That's what it comes down to. I mean,
we solved
usual high weirdness with CERN. And I mean, we can't let any of this shit slip past our fingers because it's all connecting different pieces of the puzzle. So I feel like we just literally can't not cover a story because it just combines into this whole idea that we have of CERN, because like it's undeniable at this point, dude. Like they're clearly doing occult things and trying to hide under the facade of, oh, we're just doing science. Well, like, no, science is occult.
It's like we talk about with a lot of the elites and conspiracy and things like that. Like, they're fucking telling you the truth. You know, they're telling you what they're doing. You just have to listen and put a little bit of pieces together and dig just a little bit below the surface. But no, a lot of the information's there, and it's really not that hidden or occult, if you will.
It's part of that karma aspect that it's like, if you just do something without them unknowing, it's the whole concept that it doesn't work. I don't think that's
Revelation
necessarily the
of
case.
the method type stuff.
I think it has to do with the whole karmic aspect, that it's like, if you just do something to somebody unwillingly, then that bad karma falls back on you, or that negative energy falls back on you. But even if you don't say it directly, if you tell the people exactly what you're doing and they still let it happen, then at that point, the karma falls on them, that it's their fault for just not being aware and being oblivious. So it's like the occult concept of basically like flipping the blame so that when push comes to shove, they can go, we've been telling you the whole fucking time. What do you mean? We haven't lied about shit.
Just like the
you guys are just too
thing.
dumb to put the pieces together. Like, sorry.
Plausible deniability.
Exactly. You got to trickle stuff out so that when shit hits the fan, you can be like, we know nothing, or we've been telling you the whole time, man. It's not my fault you didn't pick up on it. Like, I'm sorry.
Here.
You're dumb as shit. It's all right here, lined up. So, you have any last comments on this one before we follow on to the next story, sir?
No, I think I'm good on this one too.
Wayne's World, take it away. All right, Orin, I guess I will let you preface this one because this one is your clip/article for the week.
Okay, so as all of our normal listeners will know, I'm a big nerd when it comes to Back to the Future. If I can make a...
Scott!
Yep, there you go. If I can make a Back to the Future joke about anything we're talking about, I'm going to do it. So
I think the biggest lesson we learned, though, is to make sure that you don't go back and bang your mom.
Yeah, I mean...
That's the most important lesson learned.
A tale as old as time. But anyway, so I found this video And it's on a YouTube account called Barry. It's 12 minutes long, so we're not going to watch the whole video. But I did find an article basically like talking about this video. So we're going to kind of go through the article.
Side note,
what's up?
If anybody wants the video, we will include it down in the show description so you guys can find it.
Yeah.
Where I usually put all the list of all the articles and the links, it's down there if anybody wants to go and check it out.
Perfect. But anyway, so this article kind of talks about the video a little bit, but the basic premise is, and this is just going to check so many boxes for us. Did Back to the Future predict the 9/11 attack?
I really hope so.
All right. So we're going to jump into the article.
Nonsense.
Biden's putting his opinions in, man. I don't know what to tell you. Tell him to shut the fuck up. Shut up, old man.
He even know what day of the week it is?
I don't think he does.
All right, so this article comes from a website called Cinema Blend, and the article is also like 10 years old. But the title is Back to the Future Conspiracy Theory Connects the Trilogy to the September 11th Attacks. And
dun, dun.
This is a huge dun, dun, dun. So I'm going to kind of go through the article and then kind of interject some notes that I've taken about the video as we go through. All right, so here we go. No one legitimately believes that the Back to the Future trilogy contains numerous references to the terrorist attack of 9/11, right? I mean, on every level, the idea that a series of films that concluded in 1990 could reference a domestic terrorist attack that wouldn't occur for another 11 years, well, that's impossible. Still, this video making the rounds raises more than a few interesting points. Before going completely off the rails, it's worth a watch. I was completely ready to dismiss this new conspiracy theory as nonsense. Actually, I still believe that it's nonsense. But enough odd coincidences are pointed out in this video to at least make you pop the Back to the Future movies in your DVD player and reference the scenes that are brought into question. The beginning point of the argument is a pretty obvious one. The narrator from Barely Human 11, that's the name of the YouTube channel, notices numerous references to the Twin Towers and 9/11, starting with the name of the mall where Doc Brown is attacked by Libyan terrorists, the Twin Pines Mall, which are supposed to represent the two towers. Convenient. I'll admit I started paying attention when they noticed that Marty arrived at the mall at 1:16 a.m., which turned upside down shows us 9-1 ... 1. So I'm going to throw just some thoughts in here. Again, Twin Pines Mall, Twin Towers, a terrorist attack at the beginning of the movie takes place at the Twin Pines Mall. Like we said, the clock reads 1:16, upside down 9/11. After like Marty comes back to the future and he goes to the mall, at that point, it's the Lone Pine Mall. So it's no longer the Twin Pines Mall, sort of like the Twin Towers. There was two of them, after the attack. Now there's one tower. And also, after Marty and Doc do the initial test, when they come back and check their stopwatches, it's now 1:19 a.m., which, again, is a backwards 9/11. So do you have anything else before we jump back into the article?
I would not be surprised at this at all, considering how much symbolism seems to be in a lot of these old shows. Just to bring up another one, dude, like The Simpsons. They were down to it. They had like 9/11 as like the price and everything. They had a picture of the Twin Towers on multiple episodes. Like, dude, this is one of like the biggest conspiracies to me that I'm pretty sure that every single person that was involved, like, there were so many people that are aware of this shit. Like, down to the aspect of all of the, like, the CEOs and everybody that just happened to not be at work that day. Like, I feel like it was one of those things that it was planned for, like, 10, 15 years ahead of time, to the point where, like, everybody was already fully wrapped into the game, and they were also trying to hide stuff within media, not for the common person to figure out, but rather as, like, a calling card for other people that are the elites that know to look for the symbolism to go, okay, this is when this attack's going to happen. Twin Pines, like the people like that can read symbolism. Like they were trying to put it in plain sight, not for us, but for their other comrades.
And we're going to get a little bit deeper into those kind of thoughts as we go on. All right, so jumping back in. Later, Doc shows us stopwatches, each reading 1:19 a.m., which I just mentioned. The numbers that can be unscrambled to be 9/11. I hear you. That's a reach. The video goes on to reveal certain lingo that connects to the attacks on the Twin Towers, such as the warning of the lightning strike that is going to destroy the clock tower. Save the clock tower, a woman shouts, and there's Illuminati graphics spotted over her shoulder. So it doesn't go into a lot of detail here, but at the beginning of the movie, when Marty and his girlfriend are hanging out like at the town square, and there's the crazy woman with the like save the clock tower collection bowl or whatever. If you look behind her in that scene, there's an all-seeing eye like on one of the storefronts behind her. You can see it clear as day. So this
was still in the time when they were hiding the New World Order, before they just started openly saying it all the time.
Yeah, but that's the Illuminati graphics that they're referring to. All right, so when the video catches up with Back to the Future Part 2, however, things get really strange. They speak about a scene where a contemporary Jennifer, and that's Marty's girlfriend, is in her older self's house. On a screen, the family looks at a video of the Twin Pines, or a visual representation of them. And this isn't exactly accurate to the video nor the movie, how it's worded. Basically, in Back to the Future Part 2, when they're in the house, there's like this screen on the wall that's kind of like their, futuristic new age TV. And this scene that they're referring to, it's showing like kind of two tall, skinny trees like in a garden type situation. So it's not like the Twin Pines Mall that they're talking about. It's two trees that are in this garden setting, and it's almost like a screensaver type thing that's switching between different images. And from these two trees in this garden, the screen literally changes to the Twin Towers, like the literal Twin Towers, like not a representation, not just two buildings. It's the literal fucking Twin Towers. So these two trees literally change into the Twin Towers. And there's also a lamp that looks like the torch of the Statue of Liberty on like the coffee table in this scene. So all that's pretty crazy. Like you said, you couldn't really fall ass backwards into all that as far as I'm concerned.
Just to throw in another aspect too, wasn't Steven Spielberg involved with Back to the Future, if I'm not mistaken?
He was. He was the producer on it. I've watched a documentary like just about Back to the Future, not about like anything weird about it, but basically this was his idea, and he pretty much like gave it to Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, who is the guy who wrote Back to the Future. Robert Zemeckis was the director. He basically like gave this idea to them, is my understanding. So we're going to get into that kind of stuff a little bit later too.
Okay, as long as you bring in the Steven Spielberg concept, because
we're not going to talk about Spielberg too much, so go ahead and let her rip with that.
Well, say just to throw it in, we're talking about like the Simpsons creator, like Matt Groening. He was one of those people that seemed to always be on top of being able to guess the next big like event for whatever reason. And it seems like Spielberg was also one of those people with a lot of his movies, down to the, Close Encounters aspect, that people still use those tones to supposedly like contact UFOs. And just to bring up another funny movie reference, have you ever seen the movie Paul?
Is that like the Alien movie with like Seth Rogen or something like that?
Yeah, where he does the voice of him. So
I don't think I actually saw it.
There's a scene in there where basically the whole concept is this guy, like this alien guy, crash landed on the planet, and he was giving them knowledge, giving them whatever, and he got to a point where basically he didn't have any more knowledge, so they were going to dissect him, so he runs off. But it's a good movie for anybody that sees it. I know it came out a long time ago, but I'm still not going to ruin it. But there's a scene where he's sitting at this desk, and Steven Spielberg comes up, and he starts like asking him questions, and he's like, all right, well, why don't you do this for the movie? And he starts throwing ideas down at him. So I think it's kind of funny that it's like, even within other media, there's these like references to like Steven Spielberg being somehow aware of things. So like, it doesn't fall out of the spectrum for me for there to be the symbolism and him being involved in it in some way, shape, or form. But it almost makes more sense if you're trying to hide some shit to be like, all right, here's the movie. I'm an executive producer, but I'm not involved. Because it seems like it's kind of like, all right, I'm laying this here, but I'm not involved,
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, J. Allen Hynek, who was like the head of Project Blue Book, was like a consultant or something like that on Close Encounters. So, I mean, that's just more fuel for the conspiracy fire there,
That's what I'm saying. You got to start connecting some of these people, dude. Like Spielberg being involved is like a direct red flag for me, at least.
All right, so jumping back in, visual representation of the Twin Pines. followed by a screen that appears to show the World Trade Center. This could just be a cityscape. It does look like the Twin Towers, but it also might not be. No, it's totally the Twin Towers.
It's definitely the Twin Towers.
Still, if you go through the calculations in the video above, this movie on the screen is showing, and this is when things get really trippy to me, is showing in October of 2015. So that's like the time when Marty goes into the future in part 2. He goes to October 2015. The year that Marty and Doc travel into the future. If you went to the movie theater in real world, October 2015, you would be able to watch The Walk, a movie about the Twin Towers directed by Back to the Future director Robert Zemeckis. Yeah, that's when I started to get more than a little freaked out. I finally lost it. All right, so I'm going to, before we go on to this next part, I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit more about this because I don't think they talked about it enough in the article. So this is a movie I was not even remotely aware of. But basically, the plot of this movie is this guy trying to like tightrope walk across the gap between the Twin Towers. I know basically nothing about it other than what I've seen in, this Back to the Future stuff. But anyway, the main character in this movie at one point is wearing like the red t-shirt and black leather jacket that Marty is seen wearing at the end of Back to the Future. So this is a movie involving the Twin Towers that came out the same time as when Marty traveled to the future, and he's wearing the same clothes as Marty. So that's pretty wild, in my opinion.
Just to throw in another bit of weirdness with Robert Zemeckis, other movies he's directed include Forrest Gump and Castaway.
Mm-hmm.
And just to throw those in, of course, everybody knows the weird connections with Tom Hanks and the Hollywood elites and some of these, quote, child rings, whatever you want to call them, because I don't want to get pulled off of YouTube. But Castaway specifically, the whole thing with the hand on the ball, a lot of people have connected that conspiracy-wise with the whole like frazzle drip concept about, harvesting adrenochrome, blah, 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 blah. So anyways, point I'm trying to make, this guy also has other weird connections to some of the Hollywood underbelly and people that would be aware of shit going on with connecting some of his other movies.
No, that's a good point. All right, so we're going to jump back in. I finally lost it when the video showed Marty running back to Doc through the visual representation of September 11th. And here, again, at the end of the first movie, after, the lightning strikes the car and you see, like, the flaming tire tracks, if you pause it at that moment, to the left of the screen, there is a neon sign for like Western Auto, like auto parts store. And it's got like this curved arrow that clearly forms like a number 9. And it's right to the left of these two flaming tracks. So it kind of makes like a 9/11 with the 11 up in flames. So that's just some pretty crazy visual representation there.
Is this the one you're talking about? This picture?
I've got it on a different screen because I'm reading, but I'm sure it's the same one. Hang on.
Yeah, it's the one where it has the yellow car with the...
it.
Yeah, okay. Just so I can bring it up for the viewers / not listeners, I guess, because they can't see it, but they can go check out the clip later.
Yes. So, okay, jumping back in, Marty wearing the same clothes Zemeckis put on Philip Pettit in The Walk. We talked about that a little bit. All right, so if you scroll down here, Shane, you can see kind of side by side with Marty wearing the leather jacket and the red T-shirt, and then the guy in The Walk movie wearing basically the same thing. So jumping back into the article, why? Why is, I guess that would be Felipe Pettit dressed like Marty McFly from Back to the Future? This is all nonsense.
I was looking for the picture. Sorry.
Okay. This is all nonsense, right? There's absolutely no way that the Back to the Future movies could contain any references to terrorist attacks that wouldn't take place for another 11 years. It's physically impossible on every level. But the video is weird, right? That's a lot of coincidences, especially the ties to The Walk. It's bogus. It has to be. But it makes you think, at least a little.
Flibbity-gibbity nonsense.
Fucking Biden, keep your opinions to yourself, old man. I think he's just trying to cover it up. He's helping because he was involved with all of this because, connecting in the Clintons with the Obamas, blah, 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 going back to everything else. Yeah, he definitely knows what's up. So Biden, shut your fucking mouth.
So kind of rounding this out, one thing that they didn't talk about in the article that I thought was kind of interesting, when Marty is trying to figure out how they're going to get back to the future and how they're going to generate the power needed. And he figures out about the lightning strike. He holds up a newspaper and it literally says tower struck on the front page of this newspaper, which is kind of crazy. Again, is there anything to this? I don't know. It's a lot of weird conspiracies. Do I think Robert Zemeckis or the filmmakers had some sort of precognition? No, not necessarily. I mean, do I think the architects of 9/11, whoever that may be, based their attack off of Back to the Future? I mean, that kind of seems unlikely as well. So, I mean, I don't subscribe to the whole simulation theory, but this is kind of one of those things that makes you wonder about it a little bit,
Ain't that the truth? I mean, even on the other side of it too, it kind of makes you wonder if certain people are even fully aware. If it's hidden symbolism in the back, that has to do with the people involved at the sets, all that type of stuff. Is it the director himself or is it other people involved? Or even just going into another weird concept, the whole groupthink concept. If there's a big event that's about to happen that everybody, there's certain people that are aware of, it almost makes you wonder if it kind of creates this for lack of a better term, this negative cloud within the ether that certain people are able to pick up on it and they may not even realize it, but they'll start putting symbolism in things because it's something that's coming out subconsciously.
Manifesting almost.
Yeah, so it's almost subconsciously manifesting because everybody kind of feels this density, but they don't really know exactly what it is, but their subconscious might know, so they start putting things out without even realizing it, how many weird stories you hear about people where they'll draw something and all of a sudden they're I didn't draw that, and they'll notice weird certain things in the background, it was something subconscious that came out without the actual person doing the art realizing that they're doing it. And even connecting in with art, I mean, everybody talks about this flow state concept, or even with inventors talking about how they'll have these ideas that pop in that don't feel like theirs. I think that there's again, for lack of a better term, a spiritual type of connection or some type of non-physical connection that when things are going to happen, I feel people are subconsciously aware, or they start feeling this pressure, something's going to happen, but they don't quite know what it is,
Yeah, definitely. I think that kind of gets back to Akashic record, subconscious type stuff. The last thing I'll throw in is there's also some conspiracy theories out there about how there's a lot of symbolism in Back to the Future about Nimrod. And if you remember when we did our Freemasons episode, basically these guys worship Nimrod, and the whole the Hermes Trismegistus and basically this Nimrod character banging his mom and all that. There's a lot to unpack there, and I don't have the information right in front of me, so don't quote me on any of that, but there's a lot of that type of symbolism in Back to the Future too, allegedly, if you know where to look for
allegedly. But I feel it's one of those things that people will probably start noticing more shit if people actually put focus on it. And once it gets to a certain point of it starts becoming to a point where it's just all right, there's got to be something to it. There's just not that much coincidence that just happens.
Well, and the last thing I'll add, because I could talk about Back to the Future all night, but in part 2, where Biff is this, rich, powerful man, and he's got Biff Tannen's Pleasure Palace, which is the greatest name ever. We should name a show Biff Tannen's Pleasure Palace. But anyway, the creators of the movie have come out and said they based that whole character around Donald Trump. So, I mean, that's just a whole nother level to all the weird shit going on with this.
Hey, and with that, I feel that is a perfect transition into the next thing that we're going to be diving into.
Let's do it.
So, with that, Wayne's World, take it away. All right, so diving into the next and last article that we have for today, you guys seem to really enjoy when we dive into the more conspiratorial stuff, and we definitely covered a little bit of conspiracy with that last one, but we're going to be diving into some mainstream news conspiracy that I find absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure that you'll have a lot of thoughts on this one. But before we get into it, I do have a 1.5-minute clip to explain.
All right.
Yamish, one more thing to talk about. Over the weekend, we saw the president repost another baseless conspiracy theory on Truth Social. This time, it was about former President Biden. And normally, we may not want to share such outlandish misinformation with our viewers, but the president does have nearly 10 million followers on social media, so it's on Truth Social, so it's important to set the record straight. Tell us, what did he say this time, and what kind of pushback are we seeing?
And I'll echo your caution here because we don't usually repeat something that is so outlandish and baseless. But the president reposted an online post without context, by the way. He didn't add any commentary to it. But the person that he reposted said that former President Biden had been executed and that he was actually replaced with clones and robots that were doing the job for him. Again, this is, of course, completely unfounded. President Biden has also been clear. Not only is he dealing with sort of the challenges of being out of office, but there's also this idea that the president is also dealing with prostate cancer right now and going through treatment for that. So it's really not only a baseless claim, but also a claim that is attacking someone who is going through a real health crisis. We don't know why President Trump reposted this. The White House is declining to comment, but this is not, of course, the first time that he's reposted baseless claims, and I'm sure it will not be the last. But President Trump has not been shy about spreading conspiracy theories. In some ways, it largely, in some ways, at least partly, if not largely, got him elected because a lot of his supporters do believe in the things that he says, whether they're baseless or true. So just another, I think, a chapter of President Trump saying something that just is not true, unfortunately.
All right, Yamish,
Joe.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Dude,
Also,
Biden robots? Can you imagine that?
Biden blast.
Well, no, what's so funny about this is, quote unquote conspiracy theorists have been saying for 2 years now that Biden died and they replaced him with a body double. Like the height's different, the ears are different. They're talking
Daddy
about
Longlegs.
Yeah, like how his brother replaced him or whatever. So I mean, robots and clones, that's going a step further. But these are ideas that have been circulating for a couple years now, at least. So I think it's kind of funny that basically, like they said, these outlandish conspiracy theories are being reported on CNBC. So, I mean, whether it's true or not, I still think that's a win for conspiracy theory.
I mean, I feel like it's one of those things, though, that you have to bring stuff into, the mainstream so that you can try to, pretend like there's nothing to it. Because the simplest answer would be that anybody that's a government official is going to have a body double.
Yeah.
This isn't a conspiracy. This is something that you've seen through history because it logically makes sense that, say this person's going to go out and address a crowd of people. You don't want the actual leader to be taken out, so you use these body doubles and you keep them from a distance. So it doesn't seem out of the ordinary. But, of course, tying in with Biden, there's the whole aspect of the attached/detached lobes, which is undeniable if you look at some of these pictures. And even just to bring up this picture of Biden, I know that people's faces change over time, but once you hit a certain age, it doesn't change that drastically. Look at the people. That looks like a totally different person than that. Very close, yes, but it looks like a different person. This guy definitely looks like a different person than that. His face is a lot skinnier. His eyes are a bit different. The nose is a little bit different. And like I said, there's the whole detached, unattached earlobes, right here, detached, attached right there. There's another one with the attached earlobes right there versus the disconnected earlobes versus another picture of the disconnected earlobes. So, regardless of what you believe, I definitely think that there are body doubles for Biden. That doesn't seem out of the question by any means, especially considering that towards the end, he definitely was starting to lose his ability to even function or talk properly. So, it logically makes sense. But even on the other side, getting into a little bit more conspiratorial side, the whole idea of these synthetic fake masks, you saw how advanced that technology was for the CIA and the FBI back in the 80s, and that was only what they were talking about with mainstream. Imagine how advanced these mask technologies are now, which could definitely make sense with the attached earlobes, detached earlobes. But flipping it into the more conspiratorial shit, I mean, there's a million things going on with the whole cloning aspect. And as usual, they say that the government has 30 years more advanced than what they're telling the public. So if we were able to clone sheep back in the 90s, imagine where it might be now 30 going on 40 years later. and the ability to possibly even be able to clone people and get into the other weird aspects of things about transferring consciousness and the paranormal. And that's a whole other fucking can of worms and conspiracies. But before I keep ranting, I'll let you have some more thoughts on this one.
No, I mean, I think even if you want to look at this from not a conspiratorial or a political angle, I think it makes a lot of sense that, this was an old guy who was going through a lot of health issues. And, it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world if they did have a body double because, they didn't want this upheaval and, all this uncertainty going into an election cycle. So, I mean, even if you take a lot of the more outlandish aspects of this out of the case, I think it just makes kind of sense that something like that would happen, And
I feel like it's one of those things too that, like, with Trump, you kind of have to address it the same way as you do Alex Jones, where it's like, I think that there's some validity to what they're saying, but they just have an outlandish way of presenting the information. Like the frogs are gay thing. You actually start diving into that. You look into the whole thing with like estrogen being in the water, and then female or male frogs were starting to turn into females because of the excess amount of estrogen and stuff that was in the water. So like, it makes sense when you connect it. It's just a way of like them not presenting it in the correct way. Or on the flip side, it's an aspect of intentionally trying to muddy the waters because, when it comes to a lot of this stuff politically, I don't think that there's necessarily left or right. Like I'm always saying, I think it's, left or right wing, it's all part of the same damn bird. And both of these things may not be seeming like they're acting together on the surface, but behind the scenes, I think that all these organizations are working together and it's all just one big ploy to manipulate the masses and push in whatever agenda they're trying to push in. So, I mean, even on the flip side, I'm not saying that like Trump is totally innocent in this. I'm saying he could definitely also be one of the people that's muddying the water.
Yeah.
Or, like I said, he's just Alex Jonesing it and not presenting the information in the most logical sense and just kind of throwing an idea out there and letting people do what they want with it. But
yeah, I mean,
the robot thing seems off, but the clones and the body doubles seem pretty fucking solid.
I mean, back to the whole muddying the waters thing. I mean, how many times have we talked about, this actual legitimate thing that's kind of weird happens, and then like there's this other outlandish story that kind of discredits this real thing that happened? That could be what's going on here. Like if you hear about clones and body doubles, you're like, oh my God, that's fucking sci-fi shit. There's no way that's real. And that kind of buries the lead on, hey, maybe this guy secretly was like not functioning as president and who was running the country for the past couple of years. I mean, that's a really good way to hide a potentially very tricky political situation, we'll just say.
Yeah, I mean, especially considering like how fast he dropped out of the race once everything actually got rolling. They were trying to basically say, oh yeah, he's been fine the whole time. But then he drops out. And then as soon right after that, you start realizing that he's like partially incoherent. He's going through all of this medical stuff. So it's like clearly somebody was lying in the first place. So it definitely makes sense that they would have these body doubles. And even going into Daddy Longlegs, like the reason they call him that is because the dude's like 6 something and Joe Biden's like, higher 5. So like the guy's got a couple inches on him and he just shows up and he's full of energy. He's acting different. And there's definitely something to it.
Flibbity jibbity nonsense.
That was definitely clone Biden talking that time. There's no way in hell that was not the clone. He's trying to cover this shit up.
My dick's so big it could double as a goddamn backhoe.
Oh, damn. Well, I guess that's probably one of the side effects of cloning. I mean, you could definitely edit some genetics and, get a package.
If you're going to clone yourself or whatever, I mean, why not do some upgrades? I mean, no reason to keep everything stock at that point.
I think that was a sexual threat. I think he thinks we're small children hanging out by the pool. We don't want to play with his curly leg hair, so he has to talk about his bionic penis.
Let's not get canceled.
But before we start wrapping up this conspiracy and start wrapping up the show, do you have any final thoughts on this one? Do you think that there's any good validity to it? And what do you also think is the most logical answer for what might be going on with all the Biden stuff?
I mean, I think the most logical answer is kind of just what I said a few minutes ago. I think, it's very possible that, this was just a sick old man that was not able to do the rigors of like literally the most stressful job on the planet anymore. And rather than, invite in all this upheaval, they just, kind of threw somebody out there that kind of looked like him, and I think that's understandable. And like, I think all these, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, you know, this is an old guy, and I think all these like stories trying to cover up the fact that maybe, hey, there was something wrong with him, kind of dehumanizes, like he's being dehumanized on both sides, kind of. And I think, you know, it's one of those things, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. No, he was not okay, and no, it's probably not a fucking clone. It was just that he wasn't able to do this job anymore. And did they throw somebody out there from time to time that kind of looked at like him? I mean, that seems extremely likely to me.
And I mean, we talked about this with the Queen. I don't know how long it's been since somebody's actually like seen Biden. And I mean, even if you did, we were talking about these body doubles and stuff. It's definitely a possibility that, you know, there were body doubles in the first place. But bringing back his recent health hazard, I mean, it makes you wonder if, one, it may have already been something that existed when he was in the White House and they were just kind of trying to bide their time until he got out to be able to actually say something. Or on the flip side, like I was mentioning with the Queen, this person actually passed away a while ago, but they didn't want to deal with all the red tape in the process of it. So rather than bringing it out directly, they kind of just are hiding it behind the scenes. They put out this information that, oh, he has this medical thing going on. And then if he just kind of disappears into oblivion past that, then they already have like a rhyme or reason for it. Nobody's going to question when it may have happened exactly, because, you know, I definitely think it's a possibility that this dude could have already passed away. And they're just having these people play the character until it's that time when they can say, all right, Biden has officially passed away, because they don't want people to realize that it may have happened a couple months ago, for all we know. I mean, it may have even happened at the end of the last thing, because even when he was coming out and he was starting to do these debates and everything, he seemed like he was partially coherent. And then like the very last one before he like stopped, he didn't seem very coherent anymore. Like almost like that may have been the original Biden. And maybe that was his last hurrah. That was it. And we haven't seen him since then.
It's kind of the political version of you knock somebody up and then y'all get married right away, so you don't realize that like the baby was born out of wedlock type situation. That's what they're doing. Like, we can't let everybody know that he's dead too close to the election, because then people are going to wonder. So.
And then people are going to wonder why we threw another candidate in here. We have to make it look like he passed it over and everything is above books here.
Yeah, nothing to see.
Because, I mean, even just the bureaucratic red tape of all that shit. I mean, even beyond, like, the conspiracy. Like,
oh, yeah.
If you have this person in office, and even, you know, if anything happened in office, that instantly becomes the question, like you mentioned, of, like, who is actually in charge. So it's like, there's just so much bureaucracy involved. It's not.
It's almost.
It may not be
like,
this grand conspiracy,
yes,
but just
regardless,
rather white lie to make it easier.
Exactly.
You know?
Regardless of what your political opinion is, it just it makes sense. You know, it stands to reason, especially with like less than a year to go until an election. I mean, I don't know. I think it's an Occam's razor situation in this one. Like, the simplest solution is probably the correct one. You know.
I mean, even for the sake of the family too, like, I mean, obviously we can't necessarily fully relate because we're not somebody that's like hugely in the public eye like that. But, you know, when something happens to somebody in your family, you know, you don't want to go around telling everybody. Most people don't want to go around telling everybody. You kind of keep it to yourself until you're able to kind of like cope and deal with it. So I think that happens a lot with a lot of these celebrities, is that, you know, this is the day they claim that they died. Maybe if like, you know, paparazzi shows up, all that shit. But if you're one of these people that can be hidden behind walls and walls where the general public can't even see you, a matter of like even giving the family time to be able to cope with things before they're in the public eye talking about, you know, how does this person's death make you feel? Blah, 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 blah. Because can you imagine being bombarded by that right after the passing of somebody? Like,
yes,
it would make sense to let yourself
Both my parents
cope for
died like 8
weeks.
months within each other. So like when my dad died, like it was, you know, I tried to play the whole game, and then like I said, I wasn't even over that before my mom died. And then at that point, I just checked out. Like, I didn't return any texts, no well wishes. So, no, I totally get that aspect of it, too.
Because, I mean, even, like, the royal families and stuff, dude, it's like the second anything happens, dude, you have so many reporters, paparazzi all around your shit. It's like, if I was in that situation and I had a family member pass away, I wouldn't even mention it to the media for, like, 3 weeks just so that I had time to kind of, like, cope and rest before having to address and actually talk about this shit openly. Because the second Biden dies, it doesn't matter, quote, dies, you know, it doesn't matter how sad the family is. Like, dude, the paparazzi's gonna be in their face and they're gonna want every single opinion and aspect of the story. And if you're the fucking first lady, was the previous first lady of the country, it's not like you can do the typical actor thing where you start throwing shit at the paparazzi, you start swearing at him, you tell him to get the fuck out of your face. Like, you're that political person. You got to maintain yourself as that person. So it's like, you can't just tell these people to go the fuck away. You have to address it in the most professional way possible. And again, you need a couple weeks to cope first.
Yeah, simplest solution is probably the correct one.
Yes, sir. But
all right. So on that note, you guys, thanks for joining us today. Our next episode of Bizarre Inquiries is going to be Thursday, July the 3rd. It's going to be roughly 7:15 Eastern time on the Open Minds Media YouTube. You guys be sure to submit questions or articles or anything that you want us to talk about, and also join us in the chat. And also, if you guys want to get up with us for any reason whatsoever, Shane, tell them how they can do that.
First and foremost, you guys can email us at bizarreencounters@outlook.com. Or if you guys are listening on the other side, you guys can email me at inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com. And of course, you guys can go across social media for either show. However you guys want to choose to get a hold of us, just make sure that you guys get a hold of us, whatever's easiest for you guys. And the last way that you guys can get a hold of us is through our hotline number, and that number is 313-364-1551. And if you guys didn't catch that, it is available down in the show description.
And if you guys are not already following us on social media, be sure to do that. Instagram's where we're most active, but we're also on the TikToks and the YouTubes and the Discords and all that other good stuff. So y'all know how the internet works. Just do all the internet things.
And as I've mentioned on the last 10 shows, so I'm not going to keep beating it like a dead horse, I do have 2 new designs on the Open Minds Media merch store, the Campfire Chillin' one and the Break the Mind Control design. So if that sounds like something you guys might be interested in, don't forget to go and check those out. And if you guys might be interested in getting early access to the show or getting ad-free of the shows, you guys can go and check out the Patreon, and there's tiers starting as low as $1 a month to be able to get early access and ad-free, of course.
And like, share, and subscribe.
Do all of those things. Make sure you guys hit the bell notification up in the corner so that anytime we do go live, you guys will get a notification for it. And every single thing that we mentioned is all available in the link tree, which is, of course, available down in that show description. And if anybody wants to go and check out the articles, clips, or anything that we mentioned today, that is also available down in that show description. And with that, I have been the one that a few people refer to as Shane Squatch.
And I have been the big bad Boo Daddy, Orin Felix.
And as we tend to do, we let our minds wander. We always say bizarre. We keep it bizarre. So just like that, guys, make sure that you guys always inquire about bizarre things and stay bizarre.
Flibbity jibbity nonsense. My dick's so big it could double as a goddamn backhoe.
What the hell is even that?
Biff Tannen's Pleasure Palace?